Welcome back to Northern Tales, where silence is broken and every woman's story finds its way back to her own voice. This is the story of a girl named Zubaida. But before life broke around her, she was deeply loved. Zubaida was born into the loving home of Hamisu in the quiet town of Mani in Katsina State, where life moved slowly with the seasons, the market days, and the call to prayer from the old mosque near the emir's palace. Their house stood at the far end of a sandy road, lined with neem trees and scattered compounds built from faded mud blocks. During rainy season, the roads became thick with mud, and during Hamatan, dust entered everything: cooking pots, sleeping mats, even the folds of clothes hanging outside. There was no running water in the house, just an old well. Her father inherited the house from his own father. Every morning before school and every evening before sunset, the children carried yellow jerry cans to the borehole near the emir's house. The queue was always long. Women gossiped while pumping water. Children fought over whose turn it was, and goats wandered around eating discarded leaves from nearby food sellers. Sometimes Zubaida and her sisters would return balancing heavy containers on their heads while laughing and singing old Hausa songs. Other times, especially during dry season, they returned exhausted with aching arms and dusty feet. But despite the hardship, their home was happy. Zubaida's father, Hamis, was a driver who transported passengers and goods around Katsina State in an old commercial bus that coughed, smoked whenever it started. The bus had been bought years earlier by his younger brother, Alhaji Kabir, a wealthy politician living in Abuja. Whenever Hamisu prepared for a journey before dawn, the compound would wake up with him. The children would hear the scraping sound of his sandals outside, followed by his deep voice calling for tea, while their mothers packed food for him in old plastic containers. Hamis was not a rich man, but he was respected. Unlike many men in the village, he had completed secondary school at a time when very few people around Mani valued education. He spoke decent English, kept old newspapers beside his mattress, and believed strongly that every one of his children, boys and girls, must go to school. Knowledge is something nobody can steal from you, he always said. He had 13 children altogether. Zubaida's mother, Nana, was the second wife and had 5 children of her own. Zubaida herself was the seventh child of the entire family. In many homes, two wives meant jealousy, bitterness, and endless fighting. But not in theirs. Nana and her co-wife Talatu lived like sisters, more than rivals. If one cooked, the other helped to serve or clean. If one child fell sick, both women stayed awake caring for the child. They shared ingredients, chores, laughter, and worries without keeping count. The children moved freely between both mothers. Nobody was ever told, "You are not my child." And maybe that was why Zubaida grew up feeling loved and safe, protected, even in their poverty. At night, all the children spread mats across different rooms and slept close together, while lantern light danced against the walls. During cold Hamatan nights, they shared blankets and whispered stories until sleep took them one after another. Life in Mani was simple. The morning smelled of smoke and fried gose. Afternoons were filled with the sounds of grinding machines, donkeys pulling carts, women selling tomatoes in the market, and boys playing football barefoot on dusty fields. On Fridays, the whole village seemed to slow down after Juma prayers. During Salah periods, compounds came alive with cooking, visitors, and children wearing new clothes bought months in advance. And through all of it, education remained important in Hamisu's house. Every child attended school. Some walked long distances under the hot sun carrying worn-out bags and notebooks tied with rubber bands. But Hamisu insisted they must continue. His eldest daughter, Mariam, had already completed secondary school and gotten married in Funtua. Yet, even after marriage, she continued attending the College of Education because Hamisu believed marriage should never end a woman's future. That belief quietly shaped Zubaida. At 12 years old, she was preparing to enter secondary school herself. She was slim, observant, and unusually quiet for her age, with large, thoughtful eyes that noticed everything around her. Unlike some of her sisters who loved gossip and noise, Zubaida preferred sitting near her father whenever he returned from journeys, listening as he described different towns across Katsina. Sometimes he brought home old newspapers or damaged textbooks abandoned by passengers. Zubaida treasured them like gold. She could spend hours tracing English words she barely understood, dreaming of a future bigger than the village roads she walked every day. Back then, before tragedy found her, Zubaida still believed life would continue exactly as it always had. She did not know yet that some seasons arrive quietly and destroy everything. Among all Hamisu's siblings, the closest to him was his younger brother, Alhaji Kabir. People in Mani spoke his name with admiration. He was the success story of every village and liked to be claimed by even neighboring villages. A big politician in Abuja, a man with connections, a man whose convoy sometimes entered the village, raising dust while children chased behind, shouting excitedly. Whenever Alhaji Kabir came to Mani, people greeted him with respect and that bordered on fear. Men stood up straighter around him. Young boys rushed to open gates for him. Even elders lowered their voices when speaking to him. But unlike many wealthy men, Kabir had not forgotten his family. He helped Hamisu more times than anybody could count. It was Kabir who bought Hamisu the commercial bus that fed the entire household. He paid school fees when money became tight. During Salah, he bought bags of rice, wrappers for women, and shoes for the children. And among all Hamisu's children, he was strangely fond of Zubaida. Sometimes he would stare at her quietly before smiling. "You look exactly like our mother," he once told her. Zubaida never met her grandmother, but people said the resemblance was undeniable. The same calm eyes, same soft face, same thoughtful silence. Whenever Kabir returned from Abuja, he often brought small gifts specifically for her. Sometimes a notebook, a storybook, a pen with glister inside. Once he brought her a small English dictionary. "You must read," he told her seriously. "One day education will protect you." Those words stayed with her long after childhood. But if Alhaji Kabir was kindness, his wife was something else entirely. Her name was Hajia Kilishi, and Imani, beauty had opened doors for her long before character ever could. Even as an older woman, people still talked about how breathtaking she had been in her youth. Light-skinned, tall, graceful, with sharp features and expensive wrappers that announced wealth before she even spoke. When she walked through the village during festive periods, women stared with envy, and she enjoyed every second of it. She was exactly the kind of woman people described quietly after she passed. Beautiful outside, dangerous inside. Kilishi had never gone far in school, but she worshipped status with frightening intensity. Wealth had become her weapon, and she used it carelessly against anyone she considered beneath her, especially Hamisu's household. Whenever she visited Mani from Abuja during Eid or weddings, tensions entered the family like smoke. Suddenly, everybody became careful. Careful what they wore, careful what they say, careful not to offend her. Because Kilishi could humiliate a person without raising her voice. If Nana or Talatu visited her house, she never allowed them sit comfortably. No, 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 not there, she would say quickly if either woman moved toward the sofa. The chair is delicate. Then she would point toward the carpet on the floor. Meanwhile, her own friends relaxed on cushioned seats, drinking cold soft drinks. Sometimes she deliberately served refreshments to everybody except her Mrs. wives. Other times, she spoke loudly enough for them to hear. Some people are too comfortable with poverty, she once laughed while adjusting her gold bracelet. If I lived like this, shame would kill me. Nana usually pretended not to hear. Talatu would force a smile, but the children noticed everything, especially Zubaida. Nana's children were somehow, Kilishi's children were somehow worse. Two boys, two girls. They were spoiled, arrogant, cruel children who behaved like royalty whenever they visited Mani from Abuja. They wore expensive clothes, spoke accented English, and treated village children like dirty animals. Whenever Zubaida and her siblings came during Eid celebrations, the insults began almost immediately. Don't touch my things. You smell like firewood smoke. Why are your slippers always bent like that? Village people. Once, when Zubaida was about 10, one of the girls sprayed perfume dramatically after she sat beside them. Now the room smells better, she announced loudly while the others laughed. Another time, Zubaida's younger brother picked up a half-finished juice carton from the table thinking nobody wanted it. One of the boys slapped it from his hand. Thief! The juice spilled across the floor while everybody stared. The boy's mother did not correct him. Instead, she said coldly, you people should teach your children manners before bringing them here. During each visit, the cruelty became routine. Their cousins hid food from them, locked rooms so they could not enter, refused to let them watch television, mocked their Hausa accents whenever they attempted English. If any of Hamis's children admired something in the house, the cousins immediately guarded it suspiciously, as though poverty itself could steal. Once Zubaida accidentally touched one of the girls' dolls while cleaning up after dinner. The girl screamed so loudly you would think she had broken it. Mommy, she shouted. She touched my doll. Kilishi turned sharply. Why are you touching what does not belong to you? Zubaida froze. Well, next time use your eyes and not your hands. Everybody in the room heard it. Nobody defended her. The worst part was how they used education as a weapon, despite their own mother lacking it. Whenever Zubaida answered questions intelligently or spoke good English, the cousins became irritated. You think you are clever because you read books. You will still end up poor. Your father is only a driver. Sometimes they laughed at the condition of Hamisu's boss. Other times they mocked their clothes during Salah. Did all of you saw the same material because you couldn't afford different ones? The insults hurt. But what hurt Zubaida more was watching her mothers endure humiliation with silence and dignity. Nana never insulted Kilishi back. Never. Even after being embarrassed repeatedly. Instead, she would quietly gather her children and prepare to leave. And on the walk home through the dusty village roads, the children usually became quiet. Everybody pretending they were not hurt. Everybody pretended not to notice the difference between the two families. But deep inside Zubaida, something had already started forming. Not hatred, not jealousy. Something quieter. A determination she herself did not yet understand. Because every insult pushed her closer toward one private promise. One day, nobody would ever speak to her like that again. Then one Hamatan morning, everything changed. The news arrived before sunrise. At first, it came as whispers outside the compound, then hurried footsteps, then crying. One of Hamisu's fellow drivers had come from Katsina with terrible news. There had been an accident on the highway the previous night. A trailer carrying cement lost control near a narrow bend outside Charanchi. Hamisu's commercial bus had tried to avoid it. The bus was overturned, and then it caught fire. Nobody survived. For a long time, the family refused to believe it. Nana kept saying, no, 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 no. Malam cannot die like that. Talatu sat frozen against the wall as women gathered around her, crying softly. The younger children did not fully understand at first. They only knew something terrible had happened because adults who usually spoke calmly were suddenly shouting instructions, crying loudly, or covering their faces with wrappers. Zubaida remembered the smell of dust in the air that morning. She remembered neighbors entering the compound without salam. She remembered hearing her eldest brother screaming somewhere outside. And most painfully, she remembered waiting for someone to say there had been a mistake, that her father was alive, that he would still walk through the door, smiling tiredly from another long journey. But he never did, because by afternoon, men from the village had already traveled to identify the remains. The bus had burned so badly and almost nothing recognizable remained. The entire village mourned. For 3 days, people filled the compound, reciting Quran, bringing food, and speaking in hushed voices about how good Hamisu had been. He educated his daughters. He was honest. He respected people. Even men older than him cried openly. For Zubaida, grief felt confusing. At 12 years old, she did not yet understand how life could continue after losing someone who felt permanent. Everywhere she looked, there was evidence of him. His prayer cap hanging on the wall, his old newspapers, the empty corner where he used to sit drinking tea before dawn journeys. At night, she could hear her mother crying softly after everybody slept. That sound stayed with her forever. And suddenly, everything became uncertain. School fees, food, the future. The entire family balance Hamisu had carefully maintained collapsed overnight. That was when Alhaji Kabir stepped forward fully. He increased the monthly allowance he sent to them. He promised before elders and family members that Hamisu's children would not suffer. And to his credit, he kept his word. The children remained in school. Food continued entering the compound. During difficult months, Kabir quietly sent extra money. People praised him endlessly. Hamis was lucky to have a brother, like Kabir, people will say. But grief has a way of hiding future storms inside temporary relief. Months later, after Zubaida completed primary school, Alhaji Kabir arrived in Mani with what he called good news. He wanted to take Zubaida to Abuja. She will continue her education there with my children, he announced proudly during a family gathering. She's intelligent. Hamis would have wanted that. Everybody immediately praised the idea. Everybody except Zubaida and her mothers. The moment Nana heard it, fear entered her chest. Real fear. Because unlike the others celebrating Kabir's generosity, she knew exactly who controlled that house in Abuja. Hajia Kilishi, the beautiful woman whose cruelty hid behind expensive wrappers and soft smiles. Nana's hands trembled that night as she spoke privately with Talatu after everyone had gone to bed. She will suffer here. She will suffer there, Nana whispered. I know that woman. Talatu sighed heavily. I know too. Both women understood something the men did not. Alhaji Kabir might be powerful outside the house, but inside that home, his wife ruled everything. And she ruled it absolutely. Nana feared it was only a matter of time before Hajia Kilishi poisoned Kabir's mind against Zubaida completely. She has never liked our children, Nana said quietly. Why suddenly now? But what could they do? In their world, women did not easily challenge decisions made publicly by male elders, especially not decisions about children. Still, they tried. When Alhaji Kabir returned the following evening, Nana and Talatu approached him carefully and respectfully. Their voices were diplomatic, soft, and measured. Alhaji, Nana began nervously, we are grateful for everything you have done. May Allah reward you. But we feel maybe Zubaida should remain here with us. Kabir looked surprised. She will have better opportunities in Abuja, he said. Talatu tried gently. She is still young, and she has just lost her father. But before they could continue, Kabir's expression changed. Not angry exactly, offended. Within days, the issue exploded into full family conflict. Meetings were called, elders gathered. Male relatives spoke for hours. And slowly the discussion stopped being about Zubaida's welfare and became about authority. One uncle spoke sharply. Do the women now decide what happens to children? Another added, no child belongs to one woman alone. These children belong to the family. The women were reminded repeatedly that Kabir was helping from kindness, that refusing him was disrespectful, that they should be grateful. Nana sat through these meetings fighting tears while older men lectured her about obedience and family duty. Nobody asked Zubaida what she wanted. Nobody. And Zubaida herself felt trapped between grief and fear. She had barely survived losing her father. Now they wanted to separate her from her mother too. Every night she cried quietly beside Nana, wondering what would happen once she entered Hajia Kilishi's house permanently. Because even at 11, she already understood something terrible. Visitors can survive cruelty for a few days, but living inside it is different. Still, the pressure became unbearable. Eventually, the decision was finalized. Zubaida would go to Abuja against her wishes, against her mother's wishes, against every instinct warning them this was a mistake. The final blow came when Alhaji Kabir, assuring them, said, actually, it was my wife herself who suggested bringing Zubaida. The moment Nana heard that, her heart sank completely. Because if Hajia Kilishi truly wanted Zubaida close, then danger was already waiting for her in Abuja. That night before her journey to Abuja, Zubaida could not sleep. The compound was unusually quiet. For the first time in her life, Mani no longer felt safe. She lay beside her mother, listening to the distant barking of dogs and the soft rustling of harmattan wind against the zinc roof. Somewhere outside, a lantern flickered weakly in the darkness. Nana kept pretending to sleep, but Zubaida could hear the occasional sound of muffled crying. Finally, sometime deep into the night, her mother reached for her hand and held it tightly, as if she already knew she was losing her. Listen to me carefully, Nana whispered into the darkness. No matter what happens in Abuja, never forget who you are. Zubaida swallowed hard. I'm scared, Mama. Nana pulled her closer. So am I. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then quietly, almost like a prayer, Nana said something that Zubaida would remember for the rest of her life. Some people will try to make you feel small because they fear what you could become. The wind howled softly across the village, and somewhere far away, Abuja was already waiting for her. Thank you for listening to Northern Tales. Follow us next week to find out what happened to Zubaida in Abuja. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And please write in the comment what you predict will happen to Zubaida. See you next week.